In this lesson, we'll learn how to break the silhouette of our watery legs, making them look a little bit more organic and natural by adding some splashes. Okay, so at this point, we have spent a lot of time doing displacements, and I'm ready to go ahead and move on. I'm pretty happy generally with the look that we've achieved here for our legs. Now, at this point, I'm looking at the edge, and I feel like that it's very static. I feel like there might be some kind of a glass container in the shape of these legs because the water is completely contained within the legs. And, if this person was running and jarring that liquid around, I would think that we would have little splashes coming off the legs and maybe possibly even hitting the robe below. So let's go ahead and talk about how we can do this. I'm going to go ahead and show you 3 images here we'll be using. And I have this image here, this image, and then I have this image here. Now these again are all images I've gotten off of Stock Exchange. Check the images.txt file if you want to access these same images and download them so you can use them as well. So at this point, let's go ahead and jump over here to say maybe this one. Now, what I really like about this image, as well as this one right here, is these 2 pitchers of water have this lemon being dropped into them, and it's causing that water to shoot out the top and really create this natural splash pattern. So I want to capture that and be able to use that in our image over here. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to bounce over to our image here, and we're going to create, I'm going to do this underneath our displacement. So let me control-click the new group icon below the displacement group, and I'll call this Splashes. And let's go ahead and lasso up some selections here. I'm really going for the more well-defined splashes. Some of them have a little bit of motion blur that's affecting the particles, so I don't want those. So let me just go ahead and make a selection here. We'll just come in and grab something like this. Maybe that one. And I'm going to come real close to the edge of the glass pitcher. And we could always shave that back a little bit just to get some of those little ones that maybe we don't want removed. Make our selection a little smaller. So, okay, great. So I've got this selection made. I'm going to go ahead and just grab my move tool, and we will drag that over into our document over here. So you can see that I've dropped it into my splashes folder, and we've got one of those splashes. Let's go ahead and get the other one here. And I'm going to use 2 different ones here, as well as maybe some selections from this image, just because I want some variation in these splashes. I don't want to be using the same splash or a modification of the same splash over and over again. I want them to look a little bit more unique than that. So I'm going to come in here and try our best to get all of the defined ones. If I get a few of those blurry ones in there, it's not the end of the world, but we'll come in here just like so. Okay, great. I'll do the same thing. We'll drag this one over. Now, with those 2 splashes right next to each other, you can really see that each one needs a little something different in terms of what exactly needs to be done to it in terms of color correction. This image is very blue in the background, while this one has a slight blue tint to it. I tell you what, I'm not going to be able to do both splashes in this lesson. I'm going to go ahead and show you on one splash, and you can go ahead and sort of use the same technique, because the technique is really essentially the same. And it's very similar to the technique we've been using. So essentially what I want to do is desaturate this layer first. So I'll do that with that Control-Shift-U, and I want to level it, and I want to get the background. In this case, I want to get it to pure white. So I'm going to bring the whites up here and into the pixel area with levels, and I'm going to bring the blacks up some as well, just so we can really get those well defined. Something like that. That looks pretty good. They go a little darker with those blacks. Okay, great. Now I want to invert this, so I'll hit Control-I. And we're going to map this against a black layer. So we'll just fill this layer with black and flatten it down. And let's jump over to channels again and select our blue channel, and we'll control-click on that. Now you can see here that we've actually got something else going on here. Let me undo that. Jump back over here. And let's go ahead and hide everything above this, just like so. Okay, great. So now we'll control-click on that, and we've got just the white and gray areas selected here. So we'll select the RGB channel, jump back over, and Control-J to copy that to a new layer. And what we've done is we've just copied the splash to its own layer here. Pretty cool. So now this one is really ready to become a splash on the legs. So I'll bring those back here, and we can go ahead and delete this particular layer. And let's do this. Let's just go ahead and make a copy of this layer, and I'm going to hide the copy just so we still have a version of this that's unedited. And I'm just going to begin to free transform this around, rotate it, and get that into a good position where it looks like a splash might logically be. Now the reason I have this splashes group behind the displacement group is because I want these splashes to be masked out. So you can see here that we can't see it where it's behind the leg. And I'm going to use that to my advantage when I'm basically assembling this image together. So now at this point with these splashes, I'm probably not going to set them to overlay because if I do that, let me show you what happens. It changes them to whatever color they're on top of, and that's really not what I'm going for here. So let's undo that here and step back. There we go. And I'm going to actually shrink that down just a little bit more. It still seems rather large. Maybe just something like that. That looks pretty good. Now the beautiful thing about this technique is that we can, if we don't like this spray pattern from this particular splash, we can always come in with our lasso tool and just start moving some of it around. Maybe we want this to be moved down a little bit and spread this splash out some as it gets towards the end of it. We can really reconfigure these pixels into whatever configuration best suits this particular project. So we'll just kind of spread those out a little bit. Okay, great. So at this point, let's go ahead and just zoom in on our splash here. Now I'm looking here, and this may actually be a problem because it looks like we still have some fringing of those dark pixels there, but let's go ahead and add a a layer style to this layer. I'll just double click on the layer over here, and I'm going to click on bevel and emboss here. And I'm going to turn off, if it's on, this global light option. And then I'm going to adjust the light source essentially based on this splash's position to the light source in the composition here. So we've got this one kind of to the left side of our leg. I'm going to click on this little plus sign or this little cursor, and I'm going to move that kind of to where the light source is in relation to our splash here. So with that done, we want to zoom in on that now and adjust the size of this bevel and emboss because it's really large at this point. So let's go ahead and just drag this down some. Maybe sort of like that. Just giving our water droplets a little bit more dimension here. So now we can always come down here and change the contour of the gloss, maybe make it more round, something like that. And now that seems to brighten up the splashes just a little bit. So maybe at this point we could come in and adjust the multiply opacity for the shadows on that if they are still too dark. But you know, mine are about okay at 75%, I think. Now we can also adjust the depth of the bevel emboss up here. I don't know if I need to necessarily do that. You can see here that we're starting to introduce some weird dark marks on there. So I'm going to leave that probably at the default of 100%. But I do want to make sure this is set to up. And if we wanted to, say, soften this, maybe we had some bigger water droplets, we could always do that as well. So with that done, let's go ahead and jump over here and let's add a little bit of an inner glow. And that might be able to brighten that up even a little bit more. So you can see that by default, the inner glow's blend mode is set to screen. If we want to, we could come over and maybe change that, see what overlay might look like on that. That might look kind of nice. Might come over here based on that and kind of adjust some of our settings over here for the shadow. Maybe we're not getting quite enough of that, whatever the case may be. Now we can also come in here for the inner glow and change the color of that. So I want to go ahead and do that. I want to change it to where it's kind of the color of the sky here because that's kind of the color that I want to be reflected against these. So we'll change it just by sampling, just like so. And that should give our water droplets maybe a little bit of that color in them as well. So now we can come over here. Let's go ahead and just click off of that and do the same thing for our highlights on our bevel and emboss. Maybe come over here and sample a color or something like that. and that's starting to look pretty good. So we've created our first splash here. Now, this is something we want to do everywhere on these legs that we think that maybe the splash is coming off. So we've got it here. I would probably do it especially around the ankle area, maybe create some splashes on both sides, really start to litter the silhouette of the legs here with these water droplets, because basically this type of spray, the more we have, the more visual confusion there's going to be going on here. So that's not going to allow people to focus so much on the bodies of water that is the legs, rather than the runner as a whole, if that makes sense. So with that said, in between lessons, go ahead and use the image I just used. Feel free to lasso it up and use pieces of it. Use that image as well as this image here. And you might even come over and lasso some areas out of this image for some smaller spray patterns to bring in. And I tell you what I'll do is I'll do the same thing in between lessons. And in the next lesson, what I want to do is I want to show you how I would go about really creating even finer mist. Because, you know, these little water droplets are going to get to a point where they're so small, these layer styles really aren't going to be noticeable. So we'll do that in the next lesson.